Hey pagan family, I hope you all are doing well this week. So we have St. Patrick's Day around the corner, so I thought I would make a video today all about St. Patrick and a possible pagan alternative for celebrating this March 17th. But before I get into it, I want to give a big welcome to anyone new here. I create weekly videos about topics like tarot, paganism, and magic. So if those are topics you are interested in, do please consider hitting that subscribe button down below. So St. Patrick's Day, here in America, it's really a holiday of drinking a lot of Guinness, eating a lot of corned beef, and drunkenly parading through the streets, or at least it's like that here in Chicago. But did you know that St. Patrick's Day actually replaced a much older pagan holiday? So that's what we are going to be diving into today. So why does St. Patrick's Day fall on March 17th? Well, some documents state that St. Patrick died on March 17th in or around the year 493 CE. Though dates at that time are a bit unknown, so we don't know for sure. But what we do know is there was a much older pagan festival that occurred on March 17th, and we'll get into that for this video. But before we do, I wanted to talk a bit about some of the myths and legends surrounding good old St. Patrick. So St. Patrick actually wasn't Irish. He was born in either England or Scotland. So when he was around 16, he was enslaved by Irish raiders. They transported him to Ireland, and then he did eventually escape and went to England. And in England is where he received his religious instruction before eventually returning to Ireland to serve as a missionary. And even though St. Patrick was born in Britain, he wasn't really British because Britain was part of the Roman Empire at this time. And some documents even state that he and his family may have been part of the Roman aristocracy. So the main mythos around St. Patrick is him banishing the snakes from Ireland. Well, Ireland has never had snakes, either after St. Patrick or before St. Patrick. So what does that mean? What does it mean when they say he banished the snakes from Ireland? Well, in this case, the snakes actually might be referring to the Irish pagans. It is said that St. Patrick stood on an Irish hillside and delivered a sermon that drove the island serpents into the sea. So what do you think they're really saying here? In my view, there's two ways to think about St. Patrick. You can believe in the miracles and the mythos of St. Patrick, that he was this fearsome and powerful Christian leader. And if you look through that particular lens, you can surmise the phrase, Patrick stood on an Irish hillside and delivered a sermon that drove the island serpents into the sea. Well, that means that St. Patrick forcefully drove the pagans, or snakes in this instance, that refused to convert into the sea and to their death. So that's not sounding really good for the Irish pagans. Or we could look at a more historically accurate version of St. Patrick's story. And documents state that, well, yes, he was one of the first people who did bring Christianity to the Irish pagans, but it doesn't appear that he really had a lot of success at converting the Irish pagans to Christianity. The historical St. Patrick really wasn't that successful of a missionary because, you know, at the time of his death, Ireland was still predominantly pagan. So there's a real dichotomy in the different ways you can look at St. Patrick. On the one hand, he's this fearsome Christian leader that probably murdered tons of Irish pagans. And on the other hand, he kind of just kickstarted the conversion trend, but wasn't necessarily very successful himself. So there's a lot to discuss and debate about St. Patrick, but I don't want to dive too much into it because we need to talk about the other festival that occurs on March 17th. So for March 17th this year, instead of celebrating St. Patrick's Day, I'm going to be celebrating another holiday. I'm talking about the ancient Roman festival of Liberalia. Now, Liberalia celebrates Liber, who is a god of fertility and wine, similar to our good friend Bacchus, as well as his consort Libera, who was a goddess of agriculture and also wine. So Liberalia is celebrated with lots of feasting, processionals, and the singing of lewd and inappropriate songs. So with Liberalia, you still get all the fun bits of celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Now, beyond the feasting and drinking of Liberalia, there was a deeper meaning to this holiday. It was really a coming-of-age festival that celebrated the transition of boys into men. So Roman boys, usually around the age of 16, would remove a necklace called the bulla praetexta. Now, I do apologize for all my pronunciations on this one, but this was a hollow charm of either gold or leather that the parents would place about the necks of their children. At the Liberalia ceremony, the young men would place that necklace on an altar and dedicate it to the Lares, who were the gods of the household and family. This symbolized that they were no longer boys, but were now men. They also discarded the toga praetexta, which was decorated with a purple border, and they wore the clothing of adulthood, which was a pure white toga. And this new toga identified him as a citizen of Rome and also as an eligible voter. Then the fathers would take their sons to the forum to present them as adults and citizens of Rome. So how can we as modern pagans celebrate the ancient Roman festival of Liberalia? Well, we do have some information, specifically coming from the Roman poet Ovid. So in talking about Liberalia and the god Liber, Ovid states, "Liber, before your birth the altars were without offerings, and grass appeared on the stone-cold hearths. They tell how you set aside the first fruits for Jupiter after subduing the Ganges region and the whole of the east. You were the first to offer up cinnamon and incense from conquered lands and the roast entrails of triumphal oxen. Libations derive their name from their originator, and cake, called liba, since a part is offered on the sacred hearth. Honey cakes are baked for the god because he delights in sweet substances, and they say that Bacchus discovered honey. Father Liber loves honey. It's right to offer its discoverer glittering honey diffused through oven-warm cakes." So personally, I think I'm gonna skip the roasting of ox entrails that Ovid mentions, but I do plan on creating a honey cake for March 17th to honor the god Liber. And there are several ancient Roman recipes for honey cakes, so I will link some recipes down below in case you like to make a honey cake as well. So on March 17th this year, I'm going to take a break from my normal St. Patrick's Day festivities and instead make a Roman feast to celebrate the coming-of-age festival known as Liberalia. So now I'd love to hear your thoughts either about St. Patrick's Day or the Roman festival of Liberalia. And there is so much more to the story of St. Patrick's that I couldn't include it all in this one video. And there's a fascinating lecture by occultist Thomas Sheridan that goes in depth on the story of St. Patrick, so I will link that down below in case you'd like to give it a listen. I'd also love to hear if you are thinking of celebrating Liberalia, and if you do end up making a honey cake, definitely send me a pic on social media. So I really hope you enjoyed this video diving into some of the history of St. Patrick's Day and the pagan alternative to celebrate known as Liberalia. And before I sign off today, I also wanted to let you know about my podcast. So if you do like the content of this channel, you might also be interested in my podcast. It's called the Cosmic Keys Podcast, and it's a weekly show where we do forecasts, both tarot and astrology, each week. And we also interview a lot of different pagans, occultists, and witches. So if that sounds like something you are interested in, I will add the link down below. And thank you guys so much for watching today. I will see you all next week. Bye.